We are recording live, so I'm going to say welcome to everybody to our Parents Helping Parents session. This is our 4th Saturday session, and if you know somebody that is a parent that could benefit from this group together, just let me know. I'll get them the info and we'll join together. But this session is a bit, it's not to say that it's any more special than any other Parents Helping Parents, because we have our conversations, but this is very important for our families, and this is also very important for youth who deal with mental health challenges. And so we have been real heavy in the last, I'm going to say, 5 years or so, really focusing on mental health challenges and recognizing how serious and the different components. Here recently, it has been identified that substance abuse, which is now called substance use disorder, has been recognized as a mental health challenge or mental health disorder. And so we're going to dive in to some of those other challenges to not only allow our parents' voices to be heard, but we have a professional here, Miss Kierston Withrow with the Crisis Center. She's going to talk to us and give us her perspective as well on some of the things that she sees from that professional standpoint. So without further ado, I want us to do a small introduction. I'm Tamika Holmes with Community Care Development Network. Kierston, you want to chime in?
Hey everybody, my name is Kierston Withrow. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I work for the Crisis Center as the mental health education coordinator.
All right, who wants to go next?
My name is Miosha Courier. I have a son named Kevin that is in one of the programs that are offered through this. And I work at UAB in the research department. Right now, I just do the swabbing for the COVID.
All right, who wants to introduce themselves next?
Okay, I will go. My name is Lontrina Cook, but I go by Trina. I am with CCDN as well as a parent helping parents advocate. Also, my daughter was a part of the program where it was just Precious Pearls. I also work at UAB myself, and mental health challenges is important, and it is on the rise, and it needs to be addressed.
Okay. Ms. Reba?
My name is Deanna Mosley. I am a part of CCDN during the mentoring process. I have 2 sons that suffer with different degrees of ADHD and ODD. And in our family, we deal with mental health in the form of depression and suicide. So this is important. This will be a very important topic for me. I work for Alabama Power, and this is just a great place to be right now.
Okay. Ms. Reba, you want to do an introduction?
Yes, ma'am. My name is Rita, and I work for CCDN helping with life services, and my daughter is in the mentoring program. And for me, mental health is important as well as substance abuse. I'm a recovering addict of 3 years, and me and my daughter both suffer with problems with substance abuse. So it's something that we've both had a problem with, and then a problem within my family too. So it's something I've struggled with my whole life.
Okay, Ms. Tamika, you want to introduce yourself coming in? You'll have to unmute if you there's a little microphone. You'll have to unmute to introduce yourself. Hey, Joni. I don't think let me see if your you may have to connect your microphone, Joni. Oh, she dropped out. Oh, no, she didn't. My tiles are moving around, so y'all excuse me. Let's see. Joni, I don't think that your mic is connected. I don't know if she can. There she is. She's connecting her audio.
Hey.
There it is. Hey, Joni.
Hey.
We're doing introductions right now for this. So you can introduce yourself a little bit. Tell us who you are.
Okay. Well, I'm so thankful to be here. I really struggled to try to get in the last 2 Saturdays, so I'm really sorry. But I'm just keep on keeping on. I'm a former believer in Jesus Christ, and I just love people and want to do anything I can to help and then receive help. So
Thanks, Joni.
you're welcome.
And Miss Tamika, I don't know if you can hear me. We can give you an opportunity to unmute and introduce yourself, or if you want to stay silent, you can, or if you want to put in the chat, there is a chat option, and I want everybody to, I encourage you to use the chat to type in questions, because we really want to make this a really robust topic, and we're talking about mental health in youth. And so, Kierston, thank you so much for joining us. So tell us a little bit about the work that you do at the Crisis Center.
Okay, so yeah, so like I said earlier, I'm the mental health education coordinator. So I work on implementing curriculum in our 5-county service area on mental health, sexual violence within the school district, as well as the community.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. And so as we chime in, y'all are going to hear me ask group questions, and y'all are going to hear me ask questions directly to Kierston. And so for the group, how many of you have either, you don't have, if you don't want to answer out loud, but have a history, maybe family history of mental health challenges? And when I say mental health, we're talking about everything from the most minute things to major things. And you don't have to say what those are, but how many of you have a challenge or have had a challenge yourself? And I'm going to put my hand up because a lot of people know me as trying to have it all together. And guess what? Depression is real, y'all.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
And so this is why it's important, because we want to give you the voice. And so I'm going to pose a question out there to our parents. What challenges have you seen with your children, whether they're elementary school, preschool age children, all the way up to high school, or adult children? What are some of the challenges you've seen in dealing with mental health in your youth?
Well, I can speak up because both of my boys have ADHD, but my middle son, he has also oppositional defiance disorder. And from a perspective as a parent who's never, until I had him, did not understand what I was looking at, it was so overwhelming. It was such an uphill.
You muted yourself,
I
Deanna.
felt like, huh?
I said you just muted yourself, but you off mute now. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. But I can say, in telling the truth, that it felt like I was failing at every turn. And I don't know about anybody else, but it was so bad to the point where I thought that I was gonna lose my mind. That's some incoming call that keeps muting me, y'all.
Okay.
I felt like I was losing my mind. I felt like I was losing my child. And the communication style is so different, and depending on the actual disposition of the child dictates how I have to communicate. So I can't tell you, even today, as I sit here today, I can tell you I've won many battles. Even with the medications they always want to put you on, and you know it's not right, and you see your child just like is weird. They're just not themselves, and the things that it does to you. I'm just gonna tell you, I can't tell you how many times that I went into depression in and out. Like either somebody gonna help me or we ain't gonna make it. Let's just be flat out. We're not gonna make it unless I get some help with this. And more, I was focused more on my son than I was myself. And I will say this, that is not the correct approach. It should be a joint effort because that's a hard load to carry, especially when nobody gets what you're going through or what you're having to deal with every day. And everybody's like, oh, all you have to do is beat him. All you have to do is punish him. Oh, all you have to do is this. Oh, I'd be like, y'all need to ride in my car and understand when you can't go home, when you have no pause button, when you don't have any rest, you deal with this 24, 365, and then you have to send them to school. Don't nobody understand in school. It's a lot. And then they have the perception or understanding differently thing in learning disabilities. I'm telling y'all.
Yeah.
That's good. That's what needs to be heard. Joni, you have something?
Yeah, I wanted to share. I don't get to see my daughter just turned 14. I don't get to see her much, but I can see in her when I get to see her, or also seeing others and seeing myself with being young. If we can set boundaries and have those boundaries now as adults, as we can see, because insecurity, when you're young, when you actually care for people and you're around people who bully you or mentally their words, they call you stupid or dumb, you eventually you think those things about yourself. And it causes depression, it causes isolation, and it's really hard to get out of that. And I see that a lot with, we have a overwhelming feeling to be wanted and needed, and it hurts, the younger group. So I know if you set boundaries for a reason, and it's not to be, I guess it is to be a little different, but to be more protective, because it's harsh and it does a lot of damage when you don't know the difference.
That's a very good point. And so when we think about the kids, those things, our teenagers are already suffering through being teenagers, right? They already going through the motions of growing through puberty, being accepted. Yeah. And then you add these additional layers in of, okay, why is it that when this chemical change happens in me on going through puberty, something else happens on the other side? Not all children get diagnosed at an early age with these challenges. Sometimes it happens when puberty hits, and then all of a sudden, the diagnosis is available. So I'm gonna go to Kierston. What challenges have you seen with our youth and mental health, and what would you recommend for our parents that are going through some things like what Ms. Deanna and Ms. Joni are talking about?
Yeah, the challenges that I've seen are definitely that kids are certainly aware of mental health just because the internet is there. But a lot of them feel like it can't be them, like it's somebody else, that they're less than if they do have a mental illness. So, and then the ones that are experiencing a mental illness, they don't know who to go to. They don't know who to talk to. They don't feel safe talking to anyone. And so I feel like that's the biggest challenge, especially if the staff at the school is not being supportive, or their parents or their guardians are not being supportive in that. So that really makes a huge difference in them suffering, and not being taken seriously, like you just said. That's a big thing, because 50% of mental illnesses start by the age of 14. So, it's just really important.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's really important that we just really, listen to youth and take them seriously.
Okay, so I want to back up a minute. You said 50% start at age 14?
Yeah, well, by that age, by age 14.
Wow.
Yeah, which is true. Like I have anxiety and panic attacks, and my sister, oh, sorry, that's my cat. has bipolar disorder, and those things definitely start at an early age. And then when you're older, you think, well, I was a worrywart. I was, my sister was always up in the air. She didn't know how to handle things. So,
Mhm.
when you look back and it's like, oh, it's mental illness. But like you said, like when you're a teenager and things are changing, with
Mhm.
the attitude, they're all teenagers are depressed. What do you have to be depressed about, right? So,
So
yeah, so
that's really interesting because you mentioned two key things that can be a challenge for parents or educators to really identify because when I was growing up, all we heard was you need to pray about it. It'd be all right, you
right.
better pray. And I'm not
Yeah.
negating that prayer works because I am a prayer warrior. And when I know we got some prayer warriors on this call, mental illness is so serious that when we think about things like anxiety, that's real,
Yeah,
losing your breath.
yeah, and it's
Um,
really important because if in order to make a safe space for a child, it really starts at home. And that starts with language. So that starts with how you talk about mental illness. My nephew knows all about mental illness. He knows what mental illness is. He knows what suicide is because I know that suicide is the second leading cause of death for youth, right? Ages 10 to 34. So it's really important that he understands that if somebody's going to hurt themselves, who he needs to talk to and how to handle that. And then we really need to focus that with our kids as well. And they need to understand that if you ever are experiencing any type of depression or anxiety, that you are safe coming to me. And that goes for your friends too. If your friends are experiencing that and they don't feel safe talking to their parents, let them know that they can come and talk to me.
and I think that's an excellent tactic. I know I've seen Miss Reba do this, especially with some of her daughter's friends. I have seen, and sometimes it looks like it's just a bunch of teenagers at her house, but I get why they go there because sometimes they need that space where they can talk, and she makes that space available. My sons, when I have adult children now, but um my kids, their friends were always at my house, and I would tease with them and kid with them, but I also made it a space where it was available that, look, if something's going on, let's sit down and talk about it, because it could be a situation to where your parent really does need to be brought in so we can help explain it together how you're feeling and get you what you need. That's really how I got into doing this work, is because my kids' friends were over here all the time, and I started doing work at their school, and so that's kind of how I got into it. But as we're having this conversation, and as I think back to my own childhood, I dealt with anxiety issues and didn't even know what it was.
Right.
I dealt with depression and didn't know what it was. And so, as a child myself, not being able to have that voice or be heard, because, I got the answer, what do you got to be depressed about? Everything's done for you. So going back to that space, and I want some of our adults to go back to that space. Do you remember having a time period where you just really wanted to scream out for help and you couldn't?
Yes.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yes.
and Tamika, I wanted to say too, uh, just I know in work and everything, society is screaming for us to talk to each other like we're human beings, to have respect for one another. Because I know, like in just in work, it can be somebody that you're serving food to's moment of life or death. They're in, um, they just people want to be talked to like we're somebody. We can mess a moment up, but the way we, get angry and speak to another person, especially to a child, it can change the whole atmosphere and an attitude.
That is so good. There was a movie. What's the name of that movie we saw last night? Unhinged. There was a movie that we saw last night called Unhinged. It's at the movie theaters now. But that very thing that Miss Joni is speaking about where this woman just aggressively honked her horn behind someone who was having a bad day, and he snapped.
Mm.
And with him snapping, he just went on a spree. You know, he was popping pills during the whole thing, and it ended in victory, but not without some people getting hurt, some people dying, you know. But just thinking about that, you know, and his whole thing that he kept saying was, I'm just the person that everybody ignores. I'm the person that nobody recognizes, nobody listens to. And those words stood out to me as he was saying. I know this is a movie, but I'm just thinking about how it starts with our youth on not being heard, not being listened to. And I'm pretty sure that this guy, you know, might just thinking about his character felt like that as a child, and it grew into him as being an adult, and he literally
Can I come
became
in there
unhinged. Go ahead.
about the not being heard part? And I want to put this toward Miss Kierston because it all ties together. Like for instance, I can use my relationship with my son. I talk to my kids all the time. And the problem that I'm having with my particular child is if I don't agree with their opinion, then I'm not listening. And I can sit and break it down just as it's the best I can. That's really the real answer, the best way I can. But the way, even, and I've noticed this in a lot of children, that if you don't agree with them in your conversation and your dialogue, then you're not listening. And it creates a hostile environment to where communication is shut off, bridges are closed, and it creates a more breakdown in the psyche about nobody's listening, nobody's hearing me, nobody's understanding what my position is. And it's not that you don't, but you're trying to help them to become, even when you acknowledge their position, if I don't agree with it, I tend to come up against some fierce stuff, and I just need a perspective on that outside of my own.
Okay, yeah, I think that's a good question. And I think what is really important here is to talk about empathy. And when we think about ourselves and how maybe we want to, like, how we would want to be talked to in that situation. And from what I've seen in children, it's not not necessarily that you're disagreeing with them or that you're sharing your opinion. It's more about validating them and their response and acknowledging that what they have to say is important. So it's really more or less about empathy and just being able to say, so let's say they like the color blue and you hate that color and you like the color pink. And it's like, and they're telling you why blue is the best color, right? Because it's the color of the sky, and you know, you need oxygen, and the oxygen is in there. And you're like, yeah, all of those things are true, but also pink is the color of flowers, and we can eat flowers and we need food, right? And it's like, I at the same time I'm acknowledging what you're saying, but also why are you saying your opinion? Is it because that is benefiting you, or is it benefiting the child? And it's like, maybe sometimes we just need to let them have their opinion, because in the end, right, they're going to grow up and they're going to be awesome humans, whether we tell them, we correct their behavior every single time, right? Like my nephew Parker, let me tell you, he is smart. He is very, very smart. If he tells you something, he is probably right. But I mean, he's also a child, right? He doesn't know all of the answers. So, you know, sometimes it's easier to just be empathetic and understand that that's just his opinion, and he wants to be heard, and he thinks his opinion is important, and it's okay to just leave it at that.
So I'm glad you brought that up, because that's kind of how we start out as parents. Think about it when they're little, and let's go to the point where they drew you a picture, right? That picture in our eyesight can be jacked up. Let's be realistic. But we're gonna look at that baby's picture. We're gonna be like, oh, how pretty. You did great.
Awesome.
We're empathizing with them, right? We don't sit there and crush a little kid's hope and go, that's just ugly, but something happens. I'm going to say starting at about age 8 or 9, because that's when puberty, the age of puberty starts, where they become a little bit more opinionated, and you turn their head one good time, like, look at here, look at here, and so what happens between all that picture is just so cute to look. This is how it's going to be. What's your thoughts on that?
And it is difficult to let go, and it is difficult to let them become their own people, because they're babies and we want to protect them. And especially in this world, in this environment that we're in right now, and we want to ensure that, their mental health is good and safe. But at the same time, we do have to recognize that they are their own people, and that, their opinions to them are so important, right? They're just so important, and they look to us to validate them, make them feel important. So, even if to them it's silly, even if it's to us it's silly, and it's not a big deal, to them it's right now, right? Because right now is what's important.
So,
Well,
I would like
that would be,
I would like
Tamika,
to add
where the prayers come in at. You that's when you pray for when they get older. You pray now so that when they grow, that's because prayers do work. It just takes time. But that's where that's where that line comes in. You pray.
That's that seed. That's that seed.
I got a part B, y'all. I got a part B because the challenge I face with what you said is, I'm going to use a real life experience, okay? My son was in the right, okay? It was a school situation, and it was with an adult, right? And my son was disrespected by a teacher, and my son wanted to respond as he would any other person. And my response, and I got called to the school, and he didn't understand the teacher, you know what I'm saying? I'm like, I understood why he wanted to respond, because the teacher was wrong. But because you're in a place where you have an authority and you're not that authority, you have to learn to submit and let me know so I can take care of it. So this really happened to me. I'm just being real honest. This really happened to me. So me and him fell out because I'm like, I understand how you feel. And yes, he was wrong. I said, I would feel the same way if I was in that position, but you can't respond the way you responded. He responded disrespectfully. He puffed up and he wants, you know what I'm saying? And so I'm like, you can't do that and expect to get anybody to give you justice and to be able to help you. And you can't justify the behavior that you exhibit. That's why you are in as much trouble as you're in versus you giving it to the right people who can handle it so you don't get in trouble. So that's the real reason I brought up, because his mindset, he may be 16, but he's roughly in his emotional intelligence around 12, 13-ish.
Yeah,
and so for that reason,
with young boys in puberty, their their testosterone, it really does. I don't know why. It's just like jacks them up. They're just ready to work. And so it's like, but yeah, you're right. And it's like sometimes they do just have to learn and understand, I hear you and I understand that you're angry and that is not fair. And unfortunately, in this circumstance, sometimes we do just have to, it is what it is, and you have to let it go. And that's a real life lesson. And you can choose to let it go or you can choose to hold on to that. But in the end, you're the one who's suffering because that teacher's going to go home and not even think about it.
Yeah.
Right, and I get that. So that's why I was saying,
yeah,
I just, he doesn't, Mr. Mickey, help me in that.
He's one of those why kids, or his favorite response, and I know him because he's my mentee. His favorite response is, why? I don't understand. And he honestly does not understand.
Yeah, and I think it's okay to explain it to them, right? Because it's really the only way that we learn. Kids are so different. They're also independent. They're also individual.
Keep going.
Learn differently. So I think it's important to cherish that and just say, it's okay to ask the question why. But what I need you to do is accept that.
With him, I think what the tactic that I've changed with him, and Ms. D, this may help you, because when we do our one-on-ones, my response to him is, what do you understand?
I asked that. I promise to God.
What
God
do
is
you
my
understand? So we can fill in the gaps on what he does not understand, and then it kind of comes down to what you said, Miss Kierston. He just won't do what he want to do, and it is what it is, and so he just gonna have to deal with it in the end after we've gone around all of that. But I wanna switch up a little bit, and this is to help all of us. How can teachers, parents, and youth partner together and plan better in making sure that our youth get what they need when there is a challenge with mental health or a mental health crisis? And here's an example. I'll get a message from one of our kids in mentoring, and they'll be like, I'm really having a meltdown. Like, they haven't verbalized it to the teacher. Their parent is not there at the point or moment, or they may be working or something like that. What do I do? So I'm in this message going back and forth with this kid, giving them tips. Okay, let's breathe. Very first question I asked them, is it a 911 situation? Like, do we need to call 911? And they're like, no, but I just feel like I'm suffocating, I can't breathe. So they're having an anxiety attack. So how can we get teachers, parents, and the youth themselves on a good plan to where, okay, if that youth is having a breakdown, how to advocate that for themselves? Because one thing I learned in first responders, and a police officer told me this: if it's a situation, you are the first responder, you are your own first responder until they get there. So until that child can get what they need, we got to get them to that space. So what are some things that can be done? And I know that was a lot in that question.
No, that's okay. So just so I have a better understanding, so you're asking what is the best way to do crisis intervention when you're waiting for the next step, like the in-between step?
Uh-oh, did she freeze? Say that again, Kierston.
I said, what I hear you saying is you want to know what's the best way for crisis intervention?
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, so that's a good question. So I definitely think that the first step in crisis intervention is trying to figure out, or trying to get the student to a calm place, right? So you said that by doing breathing, trying to alleviate the panic attack, and trying to get them to a place where they can explain. That's what I would do if I was on a crisis call. One tip that I do like to use is saying, okay, well, let's count down our senses. So 5 things that you see, 4 things that you hear, and so on and so forth. Breathing obviously is great. Sometimes counting backwards from 100 is helpful. That's what I do for my personal panic attacks. And then also, if they can, lay on their back and lift their feet. I do that. I got that one trick from my friend because she's a medical assistant, so that really helps. So we want to get them to a place where they feel calm and they feel safe. So, and then once we're able to get that, we really just want to be in a position where we can listen. We need to ask questions like, okay, well, tell me a little bit about what's making you have a panic attack. Do you even know why you're having a panic attack?
So we've got some information in the chat, and I want to address these. So that's really good. One of the things is having a plan wherever they go, like a chain of command, and that's a good point, or a valid point, Miss Trina, because one of the things that I had to do, and this isn't mental health, but this is a physical health issue. My youngest son suffered from a nosebleed condition. And when I tell y'all, this is not your regular, I'm having a nosebleed and it stopped. No, this is to the point where my son has had like 10 surgeries since he was 8 years old. That's how deep his nosebleed situation has been. And so we had to come up with a plan, no lie. Every school he went to, I had to find a teacher that was going to be his go-to person. You know, who, and I asked him who was his favorite teacher, who was the one that kind of, loved on him. And every school he went to, he had that teacher. And I just went to that teacher and I said, hey, my baby, you know how bad his situation is. I need you to help be his education advocate for me. When he goes to school, he's having a nosebleed, because it was some time periods where his condition actually got him in trouble. And so if I'm not there and he walks out of class because he's got goes tend to a nosebleed, he would get in trouble because he walked out of class. And so the same thing I would say, there needs to be a plan of action for parents and maybe that one teacher. Okay, this kid is having a mental breakdown, and you're the person that they go to. That's something that we can come up with. Because right now, I'm getting the text messages, and I have to, all right, what do we do? What's our step? What's our routine? So that can be something that parents can do as well. What advice do you have for parents who, one of the things that stood out to me is Miss Deanna's like, look, he going through, I'm going through.
Tamika,
hey, go ahead.
I know with Amnesty,
Mhm.
we've had issues before, and before she was at Banks, she was at a trauma induced school, so they were able to work with her. They were trained to work with her. But being at Banks, what I found that was helpful is I make them aware of it ahead of time. They're aware of the situation, so they know if it's a situation like if she's if she's put in a crowded area, or like if there's too much noise, if there's a lot of yelling, she'll have a panic attack. She freaks out. So they already know up front. So when I registered her, I made them aware of the situation so they knew what the signs were to look for.
That's
I
good.
found that was helpful.
That's good. What about kids who kind of go into isolation? We've got some kids that would prefer to be by themselves. They don't want to be around people. Not to say that's always a bad thing, because sometimes it keeps them out of trouble. But is there anything that we need to look at when a kid they don't have very many friends, they're not in a space where they just cooped up in their room all the time? What could that be leading to, Miss Kierston? They're not developing those social skills or those social interactions.
Well, I can't speak to definitely speak to the fact that, isolation is a risk factor for depression. And so certainly if you do see that your children are, if there's a change in their behavior, if they're isolating themselves, they're not wanting to get out anymore, that's certainly something that you want to look into and maybe ask them, like, well, what's making you want to feel isolated? Or, hey, I've noticed you're not asking to go hang out with your friends like you used to. Or you're not as talkative as you once were. So I definitely think it's important to give them the space to say, well, what's up with that? Let's talk about that. Let's go check in.
That's good. That's good. I don't
Tamika.
know if you, hey, go ahead.
Hey, I just wanted to make a suggestion. I'm super thankful for a group, because I know that Jaden is the overflow of surrendering. I needed help, whether it be the group, the Lord, the people, to give the stress, to give anxiety, to lay all that stuff down and talk about it, week after week, so that I could heal from inside out. Because if we don't, our anxiety, our aggravation, our kids feel it, they see it, and they react to it. And I just think that us as parents, find a group. I didn't want to go to group myself. I had to make myself go. Then it become a habit. And I started seeing results in it, and then I just continued to go. And I just think it helps us as human beings to, you know, to help with our children.
I'd like
And
to speak on that. That's a really good point, Joni. Kids definitely know when their parents are stressed. They know when something's wrong. They know when they're experiencing depression. So if you think that your kids don't know, if you think you're hiding it, I promise you, you're not. Your kids are much smarter than they think they are. So it is important to, if you are having a bad day, just talk to them about it, right? Like we're all human. 1 in 5 adults have a mental illness. And so, it's important that we talk to them because one day they will be adults, and we don't want them to ever feel shame if they do have a mental illness themselves. You should feel safe to know, like, it's okay. Like me, like I have anxiety and I have panic attacks, and that's okay. And I'm going to talk about it because we do want to break the shame and the stigma that comes with mental illness.
that's good.
And
Go ahead, Yana.
I know that when I'm having a bad day or if I'm going through something, and I just tell my kids, look, mama's is not the best right now. My mind is not where it needs to be. I can't deal with a whole lot right now. And if it's just not necessary, please give me a minute to try to get myself in a place so I can be mama. I'm actually open and honest with that because I can't tell you doing this by myself. 27 years
Mhm,
dealing with the issues that come behind it and the depression and the anxiety because I've had panic attacks too. It's just a lot
mhm, mhm.
to do everything by myself. So I'm open about it. Now, just yesterday or 2 days ago, I told my son for the first time that I go through bouts of depression, depending on how stressful life is, just being a parent. And I'm not trying to say anything bad, but sometimes it's just overwhelming. And they looked at me cockeyed and crazy, like I said something that I had two heads. But I'm just saying, be honest. I'm
Yeah,
honest about
and I
mine.
think that's important too because I think your kids are watching you and they're absorbing everything that you do, right? So when you're showing them and telling them, look, I too have a mental illness, but that doesn't mean that I get to disrespect my parents. That doesn't mean that I can't go to work. What it means is that I do have a harder life because I have to deal with this, but I'm also going to do what I have to do to cope so that way I can have a life where I'm functioning and I'm not miserable.
Mm.
So I want to go to a couple of additional layers. One additional layer I'm thinking about, and this is coming from the chat, when we have things that we know that every youth is going to have to endure because we endured it. And some of us
Mhm.
as adults are still enduring it in different ways. Peer pressure and bullying um, for someone who's young, along with a mental health challenge. How much more difficult can that be for that young person?
1
Yeah.
million trillion times.
Mhm,
I can say that because, like, my sons, even my 27-year-old, like something that we would see as minor is like astronomically huge. And it's hard, and you don't want to minimize how they feel, trying to get them to bring that from a million down. I can say it's exceptionally hard. It's a hard on the psyche on how to deal with it without minimizing. So they'll still be open, so they'll still come to you, so you can still have those conversations so they can be transparent.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point, the minimization of something. So, even as an adult, right? So for me, like my boyfriend is older than I am, and so he knows that when I am being over dramatic about something, that he knows that it will pass, right? So I think it's important to remember that we also experience those things as an adult. It's just we forget because they're kids and everything is dramatic, and so we tend to think that they think everything is dramatic, and that's okay. It can be dramatic because in 5 years they're going to look back and say, wow, that was, I can't believe I reacted that way. And that's a part of growth. That's a part of maturing, right? Or like even my boyfriend at 13, he broke my heart because he kissed another girl. Like, how could he do that to me? Right now, it's hilarious. right? Like, I joke around about it. I put it in my presentations and it's funny. So, it's just important that we acknowledge that, yeah, things are dramatic and that's really okay.
So I'm going to break it down into segments. Top 3 tips that you have for parents on advocating for their kids in a education session. What
Check
do
your
you?
language, check your language, check your language. Think about how you're talking about mental illness. Think about how you're talking about suicide. Because if you're saying things like, oh, well, they're just looking for attention, or, oh, they won't really do it, or, what do you have to be depressed about? Someone even told me that they thought anxiety was a spirit, and I had to explain to her that it was a mental illness. So please remember that your kids are listening, that they are hearing you, and that if you are talking negatively, your kids will not come to you and tell you when something is wrong. All right. So really check your language and check how you're talking to your kids. Create the safe space at home. Okay. Talk about mental illness. Talk about it, talk about it, talk about it. Talk about self care. Talk about how to deal with mental illness. Talk about coping. Talk about the fact that some people live with mental illness their entire lives. Okay, because they really think that, oh, well, when I get older, this will be over. And it's like, unfortunately, baby, that's not how it works, right? We have to, we're going to help you now so that way you can be more dependent, or you can cope better when you're older. And then the last tip that I have is empathy, empathy, empathy. Please, 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 please do your homework. Read up on Brene Brown. There's lots of videos on empathy. Do whatever you can to practice empathy at all times, because your kids deserve empathy, and it is not easy to be empathetic. It really takes a lot of hard work.
Can you share those resources? And because what I'm going to do is, as we're recording this, I'm going to put those resources out there and send them to our parents as well. Before we get ready to convene, I put a link in the chat, but I'm going to email it individually to each and every one of y'all. It's a quick survey, 5 minutes. And this is information that can be very helpful to the school system and to be able to help individuals just learn more about how to advocate. I went with Miss Deanna to her son's school, and actually we had a sit down with all of her son's teachers. And although we've got it in the paperwork, I think this was maybe the chair of their team or whatever, he said that the way that we came in and was able to explain this child to the teachers, he wanted her to do it twice a year. It was like, can you come at the beginning of the year and when that second semester starts? Because what it does, you have all the technical terms and the legal terms and the paperwork, but it's not giving insight to this child, to the teachers, so they'll be better equipped on how to handle a child that has those challenges. And so I want to encourage y'all, if you have a child with anxiety, ADD, ADHD, depression, heck, if you even have a child that's got a bladder infection, if it's something physical going on, go up to those teachers, the school, the educators, make the time, because it's going to make a world of difference in how they're able to communicate with your child versus the hundreds of others that are not getting this. And I made the statement to one of my partners. I said, counseling in school is not like it used to be. When I was growing up, you had a guidance counselor that would help talk to you about stress and everything from the things that were going on with you, and from a sad standpoint to those puberty issues. But then it switches when you get in high school, because in high school, guidance counseling is, let's prepare you for college. Let's make sure that your grades are on track. Well, I am verbalizing, and I hope that my voice is heard, your voices are heard, that we need both when they get to high school. We need
Yes.
those actual clinical counselors that youth can go to when they are feeling sad, when they're feeling depressed, when they're having anxiety attacks. But you also, there is space for those counselors, those career type counselors, or those life planning type counselors on what you're going to do after you graduate high school. So, Kierston, there's not enough of you. I'm going to go ahead and tell you, there's not enough of you in the school system. So, Kierston has put her phone number in the chat. So I
So-
encourage you. Go
So
ahead,
that's
Kierston.
actually, so I do just, but before I jump off here, I just want to encourage you that it's good to have a plan with your kids to let them know that if for some reason they do want to talk, but they don't feel safe talking to you about it, that's also okay. We do want to respect their space. So the crisis line is a place that we can do that. So if for some reason they need to report abuse or anything like that, they can do that, and then we can handle that as well. So please let them know that they can reach out, they can talk to us. It's confidential, and that's also for anyone at any time. We're open 24/7.
Thank you, Kristen. And I put the link in the chat so you can copy and paste it and put it in a browser and take the survey. Does anybody have any more questions, last comments, anything before we get ready to get off?
I just want to say, if we don't do anything else for our kids with mental health, you have to advocate. Nobody is going to advocate for your child more than you will, because they don't understand your child like you do. They're not going to be as empathetic as you will be, because it is your child and you understand their weaknesses as well as their strong points. So do your research on the issues your doctors are saying that your child has. It's very important to understand what's actually happening to them, and utilize that to help yourself, help your children. Because if you don't help them and they're not aware of how to help themselves, no one else will.
Thank you for that comment. Kierston, I thank you for your time today. Y'all gonna hear the baby crying in the background. I apologize. She's sleepy. Thank you, parents, for joining us. The next session will be the second Tuesday in November. We won't have a fourth Saturday because of the holidays, but we'll come back together again the second Tuesday in December. If you need me, or if you need to have a one-on-one session, please email me or text me. I am available. If there are resources that you need, please message me. We will get those resources to you. So thank y'all so much for joining us for this session, and I love y'all. Have a fantastic weekend.
You too.
All right.
Thank you, Kirsten.
Bye-bye, y'all.